My name is Sophie, and I'm 36 years old. When I was 17, my parents physically assaulted me and threw me out of their home for being gay. I was just a teenager with nowhere to go, forced to sleep in my car in the dead of winter. Somehow, I managed to build a successful life for myself despite being abandoned. After 19 years of silence, my narcissistic mother suddenly reappeared with shocking demands for my property as atonement for my sin. Her outrageous behavior eventually got her arrested. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I finally got justice after all these years. I grew up in a small conservative town in Pennsylvania where everyone knew everyone's business and the church was the center of community life. My father James wasn't just a regular churchgoer. He was a deacon at our local church, known for his thundering voice when reading scripture and his unflinching stance on what he called moral degradation in America. My mother Diana was the perfect complementary piece to his rigid religious framework. She was a perfectionist housewife who spent more time worrying about appearances than actual happiness. Our home was immaculate, much like the image my parents tried to project to the community. The furniture was always perfectly arranged, the family photos displayed just so, showing us as the ideal God-fearing family. But beneath that polished surface was a household ruled by fear and conformity. I first realized I was different around the age of 12. While the other girls in my class were developing crushes on boys, I found myself drawn to my female classmates. At first, I didn't understand what these feelings meant. I just knew they were there and somehow they felt natural to me. But in a house where even watching certain TV shows was considered sinful, I quickly learned to bury these thoughts deep inside. Every evening, we had mandatory Bible readings. My father would select passages that often focused on sin, hellfire, and the importance of purity. Many nights, those readings felt personally directed at me, even though I had never spoken a word about my feelings to anyone. It was as if he could sense my otherness and was trying to pray it out of me before it took root. Sophie read Leviticus 18:22. He would command his eyes boring into mine across the dining room table. I would read the verse condemning homosexuality with a steady voice, while my insides twisted with shame and fear. All the while, my mother would nod approvingly, completely oblivious to my inner turmoil, or perhaps choosing to ignore it. My younger brother Adam was the clear favorite in our family. He was 4 years younger than me, athletic, charming, and completely in tune with our parents' expectations. He played football, served as an altar boy, and never questioned a single teaching from our church. My parents beamed with pride at his every accomplishment, while my own achievements in academics were treated as expected rather than celebrated. I tried desperately to fit in both at home and at school. I dated boys from church, joined the youth group, and even volunteered to teach Sunday school to younger children. I became an expert at presenting the version of myself that everyone wanted to see. Yet each time I returned home from a date, I felt emptier than before, playing a role that grew more exhausting with each passing day. The one bright spot in my life was my best friend Megan. She came from a family that attended our church, but was considerably more moderate in their views. We met in 6th grade when she moved to town, and something about her free-spirited nature drew me to her immediately. With Megan, I could almost be myself, though even with her, I kept my deepest secret hidden. "You seem sad sometimes, Sophie, even when you're smiling," she once told me as we sat on her porch swing after school. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" I nodded, but changed the subject. The risk felt too great, even with her. As I entered my teenage years, my mother's narcissistic tendencies became increasingly apparent. Everything about me became subject to criticism, from my hair, to my posture, to the tone of my voice when speaking to adults. Nothing was ever good enough. Meanwhile, she paraded me around at church functions like an accessory, bragging about my grades and community service, while simultaneously whispering harsh corrections in my ear. "Stand up straight, Sophie. Smile more. Not that much. Don't look so nervous. Why can't you be more like Jennifer's daughter?" The constant stream of criticism wore me down day by day. I was a prop in her life, a character in the perfect family story she was determined to write, regardless of who I actually was. As I approached my 17th birthday, the weight of living this double life became unbearable. I knew I couldn't maintain the facade much longer, but I had no idea how devastating the consequences of truth would be. By the time I turned 17, I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of my secret. Every Sunday sermon about the homosexual agenda, or my father's dinner table rants about moral decay, felt like personal attacks, though they couldn't possibly have known yet. I was dying inside piece by piece every day that I pretended to be someone I wasn't. That spring, I met Tara in my AP English class. She had transferred from a school in Philadelphia and carried herself with a confidence I envied. She didn't seem to care what others thought of her short hair or her outspoken opinions on politics and social issues. When our teacher paired us for a project on The Great Gatsby, something shifted in my world. We spent hours at the public library supposedly analysing Fitzgerald's symbolism, but mostly talking about music books and eventually our lives. One afternoon, as we sat tucked away in the back corner of the library, Tara looked at me with those intense brown eyes of hers and asked, "You're not straight, are you?" The question hung in the air between us, terrifying and liberating at the same time. After 17 years of hiding, someone had seen through me in just a few weeks. I couldn't speak, but my eyes filled with tears, which was answer enough. "It's okay," she said, reaching for my hand. "Me neither." That was the beginning of my first relationship. It was innocent by most standards. Secret meetings at the library or the park, talking for hours, occasionally holding hands when we were sure no one was looking. Tara had come out to her parents the year before, and while they weren't exactly thrilled, they hadn't disowned her. Her experience gave me a dangerous thing hope. We were careful, so careful, but not careful enough. One Saturday afternoon in October, my mother had told me she would be at a church fundraiser all day. Tara and I decided to risk going to the mall 2 towns over just to spend time together, somewhere other than the library or the park. For a few precious hours, we were just 2 teenagers enjoying each other's company. We got pretzels tried on silly hats in a boutique, and for one brief, incautious moment, while sitting on a bench near the fountain, she held my hand. And that's when I heard my mother's voice. "Sophie, what are you doing here?" She was standing there with 2 women from church shopping bags in hand, staring at our interlocked fingers. I dropped Tara's hand immediately, but it was too late. I saw the recognition in my mother's eyes, followed by something that looked like disgust. "We need to go home. Now," she said, her voice eerily calm. The drive home was silent and suffocating. My mother didn't say a word, just gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. I texted Tara from my pocket without looking at my phone. She saw us. "I'm scared." When we pulled into our driveway, my father's car was already there. My mother must have called him on her way to pick me up. My stomach dropped to my feet as I realized she had told him everything. Walking into that house felt like walking to my execution. They were waiting for me in the living room. My father stood by the fireplace, his face like stone, while my mother sat rigidly on the edge of the sofa. Adam was nowhere to be seen, probably sent to a friend's house. "Is it true?" my father asked without preamble. "Your mother says she saw you holding hands with that girl like you're some kind of couple." I could have lied. For a split second, I considered it. I could have said we were just friends, that it wasn't what it looked like. But 17 years of living a lie had worn me down to nothing, and in that moment, standing before them, I couldn't do it anymore. "Yes," I said, my voice barely audible. "Tara is my girlfriend." What happened next remains the most traumatic experience of my life. My father's face contorted with rage as he crossed the room in 2 strides. The slap came without warning, the force of it knocking me against the wall. "No daughter of mine is going to be a deviant," he roared, grabbing my shoulders and shaking me so hard my teeth rattled. "We raised you in a Christian home. We taught you right from wrong." My mother didn't try to stop him. Instead, she began quoting Bible verses at me, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "Man shall not lie with man as with a woman. It is an abomination. Do you want to burn in hell, Sophie? Is that what you want?" I tried to speak, to explain that I couldn't change who I was, but each attempt was met with more physical and verbal abuse. My father pushed me against the wall again, his forearm against my throat. "This is just rebellion," he spat. "You're doing this to hurt us, to embarrass us in front of the whole community." From the corner of my eye, I saw Adam standing at the top of the stairs, watching in horror, too afraid to intervene. Our eyes met briefly before he disappeared back into his room. I didn't blame him. He was just 13. The neighbors must have heard the shouting, but no one called the police. In our community, family matters stayed private, even when those matters included violence against a child. After what felt like hours, but was probably 20 minutes, my father finally stepped back, breathing heavily. "You have 1 hour, he said, his voice suddenly cold and controlled. 1 hour to pack your things and get out of this house. You are no longer welcome here." "James," my mother said, speaking to him for the first time since the assault began. For a moment I thought she might defend me. Instead she said, Make sure she leaves her phone and car keys. We paid for those. I stood there, my cheek throbbing, unable to process what was happening. Where am I supposed to go? I asked, my voice breaking. That's not our concern anymore, my father replied. You've made your choice. As I turned to go upstairs and pack, my mother added, as far as we're concerned, we no longer have a daughter. You're dead to us, Sophie. I packed whatever I could fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack. As I was coming back downstairs, I saw my mother in the hallway taking down the family photos that included me and throwing them into the trash. She was already erasing me from our family history. They stood watching as I loaded my things into my old Honda Civic, which thankfully was in my name since I had saved for it myself. My father had thrown my school backpack onto the front lawn. As a final cruelty before I drove away, my mother tossed a trash bag at my feet containing the photo albums from my childhood. You might as well take these, she said coldly. We don't need reminders of our failure. Those were the last words my mother said to me before I drove away from the only home I had ever known, with no idea where I would sleep that night. The first 3 nights after being disowned, I slept in my car parked behind a Walmart. October in Pennsylvania was already cold, and I would run the engine periodically throughout the night just to stay warm. During the day, I would go to school as if nothing had happened, wash up in the school bathroom, and change clothes before anyone could notice something was wrong. I was in shock. The bruises on my face and neck from my father's assault were difficult to hide, but I managed with makeup and high-collared shirts. I avoided Tara at first, irrationally blaming her for what had happened, though I knew in my heart none of it was her fault. On the 4th day during lunch period, Megan cornered me in the hallway. Where have you been? I've been calling your house, and your mum said you were staying with relatives, she said. Then stopped abruptly when she saw my face up close. Sophie, what happened to you? I broke down then, telling her everything through tears in the empty band room where we could have privacy. Her reaction was immediate and decisive. You're coming home with me. Right now. We're going to talk to my parents. I was terrified. What if Megan's parents reacted the same way mine had, but I was desperate and had nowhere else to go? To my surprise and immense relief, Megan's parents were horrified by what mine had done. Her mother, a nurse, examined the bruises on my neck and insisted on taking photos in case we need them later. Her father, usually a quiet man, was visibly angry. No parent has the right to do this to their child, he said firmly. You can stay with us until we figure something out. They set me up in their guest room, and for the first time in 4 days, I slept in a real bed. The next day, Megan's mother went with me to file a police report about the assault, though I was too scared to press charges. I was still 17, legally a minor, and terrified of being forced to return home or put into foster care for the remaining months until my 18th birthday. The police officer was sympathetic, but explained that without pressing charges, there wasn't much they could do. However, he helped connect me with social services who explained my options. Since I was months away from turning 18 and doing well in school, they agreed to help me file for emancipation rather than placing me in the foster system. Meanwhile, I needed to support myself. I found a job waitressing at a local diner, working evenings and weekends while continuing to attend school. Megan's parents generously allowed me to stay with them rent-free until graduation, but I insisted on contributing what I could for groceries. The emotional toll was devastating. I had nightmares about my father's hands around my throat. I developed panic attacks that would strike without warning, leaving me breathless and terrified in the middle of the school hallway or during a shift at the diner. I lost weight, my grades slipped, and there were days I could barely get out of bed. Tara and I talked things through eventually. She was consumed with guilt, though none of it was her fault. Our relationship couldn't survive the trauma of what had happened, and we drifted apart, though she remained a supportive friend. It would be years before I could trust enough to enter another relationship. In January, I met Julia, a college student who worked at the diner on her winter break. She was 22 and lived in an apartment near the community college, one town over. We bonded over busy shifts and her generous habit of sharing her textbooks with me when business was slow. Have you thought about college? She asked one night as we counted our tips. I laughed bitterly. With what money my parents would have paid if I was the straight daughter they wanted, but now I'm on my own. Julia didn't dismiss my concerns, but instead walked me through the process of applying for financial aid as an independent student, explaining how I could start at community college and transfer to a 4-year school later. For the first time since being disowned, I started to see a possible future for myself beyond mere survival. Working multiple jobs became my reality. After graduating high school, I picked up a morning shift at a coffee shop while keeping my evening waitressing job. Between shifts, I took classes at the community college, following Julia's advice. I was exhausted all the time, but the alternative, giving up, seemed worse. Holidays were the loneliest times. Thanksgiving, Christmas, my birthday all came and went with painful awareness of what I had lost. Megan's family always included me in their celebrations, but I felt like an intruder in their happy family moments, a reminder of how families could fracture beyond repair. Occasionally, I would hear updates about my family through mutual acquaintances. My mother had told everyone at church that I had gone away to a special school, a convenient lie to cover my disappearance. Later, when that excuse wore thin, the story changed. According to church gossip, I had fallen in with a bad crowd and chosen to cut ties with my family, breaking my poor parents' hearts. The most painful news came from my former Sunday school teacher, who ran into me at the grocery store and didn't know I was supposed to be a taboo subject. She mentioned casually that my brother Adam had been forbidden to even say my name at home. "Your mother tears up any time someone mentions you," she said, apparently thinking this indicated how much my mother missed me, rather than recognizing it as the performance it was. By the time I was 20, I had saved enough money to move to Boston. I needed a fresh start somewhere. No one knew me or my story, somewhere I could rebuild myself from scratch. The night before I left, I sat with Megan on her parents' porch swing, just as we had done countless times throughout our friendship. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, worried about me being alone in a new city. "I have to go," I told her. "If I stay here, I'll always be the girl whose parents threw her away. I need to find out who else I can be." The next morning, I packed everything I owned into my old Honda and drove toward a future I could barely imagine, but was determined to create for myself. Boston was terrifying at first. I had never lived in a big city, and the pace, the noise, and the indifference of strangers was overwhelming after small-town Pennsylvania. I found a tiny studio apartment that I could barely afford and a job waiting tables at an upscale restaurant in Back Bay. The tips were better than the diner back home, but the cost of living quickly ate through my savings. I continued taking classes at a community college, though progress was slow since I could only afford 1 or 2 classes per semester. Some nights after double shifts and late-night studying, I would question my decision to leave everything familiar behind. But then I would remember the look on my father's face as he struck me, and I knew I could never go back. 6 months into my Boston life, I met Eleanor. She was in her 60s, a regular at the restaurant where I worked. She always requested my section and tipped generously. One evening, after observing me mediating a dispute between 2 other servers, she handed me her business card, along with her usual generous tip. "You're wasted in food service, dear," she said matter-of-factly. "I could use someone with your people skills at my office. Call me if you're interested." Eleanor owned a small but successful real estate company specializing in properties in emerging neighborhoods. She had built her business from nothing in the 1980s, a time when women in real estate were still oddities. When I called her the next day, she offered me a job as her assistant on the spot at a salary that was nearly double what I made waiting tables. I knew nothing about real estate, but Eleanor became not just my employer, but my mentor. Under her guidance, I learnt the business. From the ground up, starting with answering phones and scheduling appointments, then gradually taking on more responsibility. She was the first openly lesbian business owner I had ever known, and watching her navigate the world with confidence gave me hope for my own future. The trick to success, Eleanor told me one day as we drove to a property showing, is to look for value where others see only problems. That rundown triple-decker, most people see a money pit. I see the beautiful housing it could become, with the right investment and vision. I took her philosophy to heart, not just about real estate, but about life. My own circumstances had been problematic to say the least, but perhaps there was value to be found in my experiences, a foundation to build upon rather than a past to escape. With Eleanor's encouragement, I continued my education, taking night classes in business and real estate. I obtained my real estate license at 23 and began showing properties alongside my administrative duties. By 24, I was handling my own client list, specializing in first-time home buyers, who, like me, were often overwhelmed by the process and grateful for clear guidance. At 25, I made my first property investment. It was a small, dilapidated single-family home in a neighborhood that was just beginning to see signs of revival. Eleanor helped me secure financing and guided me through the renovation process. 6 months of weekends and evenings spent painting, repairing, and updating transformed the neglected house into a charming home that sold for a significant profit. That first success gave me the confidence and capital to continue. Over the next few years, I developed a pattern: buy properties that needed work in neighborhoods poised for growth, renovate them thoughtfully, and either sell for profit or hold and rent. By 30, I had a small portfolio of rental properties, generating steady income alongside my real estate sales career. As my financial situation improved, so did my personal life. I gradually built what Eleanor called my chosen family, a tight-knit group of friends who provided the support and connection I had lost when my biological family rejected me. We celebrated holidays together, helped each other through crises, and created new traditions that healed some of the wounds from my past. At 28, I met Rachel at a business conference for women entrepreneurs. She was a graphic designer who had started her own branding agency and was speaking on a panel about digital marketing for small businesses. We exchanged business cards, had coffee to discuss potentially working together, and ended up talking for 3 hours about everything except business. Our relationship developed naturally and healthily, though not without challenges. My past trauma made trust difficult, and I still struggled with the deep-seated fear of abandonment that my parents had instilled. Rachel was patient and understanding, never pushing me beyond my comfort zone, but gently encouraging me to open up more with each passing month. 3 years later, we married in a beautiful ceremony at a historic estate outside Boston. Eleanor was my person of honor, and my chosen family filled the venue with love and support. No blood relatives attended my wedding, a fact that I had come to accept, though the absence of my brother Adam still stung. I had tried to find him on social media over the years, but with no success. I often wondered if he ever thought of me, if he believed the lies our parents had undoubtedly told about why I disappeared. Throughout these years of building my new life, I had worked with a therapist to process my trauma. The journey wasn't linear, and there were still days when the past would ambush me with unexpected force. A certain Bible verse, heard in passing the scent of my mother's perfume on a stranger, or seeing a father and daughter walking together, could trigger memories that left me shaken. But I had built a beautiful life despite everything. Rachel and I purchased a Victorian home in a leafy neighborhood and lovingly restored it room by room. We discussed having children, researching adoption and sperm donors. The future stretched before us, full of possibilities that my 17-year-old self sleeping in her car behind Walmart could never have imagined. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, 19 years after being disowned, my phone rang with an unknown Pennsylvania number, and my carefully constructed world began to tremble. I was at my home office desk reviewing contracts when the call came through. Unknown number, Pennsylvania area code. My first thought was that it might be an old client from my early days in real estate, so I answered with my professional voice. Sophie Taylor speaking. There was a moment of silence, and then a voice I hadn't heard in 19 years said, "Sophie, is that really you?" My hands began to shake so badly I nearly dropped the phone. My mother's voice hadn't changed much, still carrying that slight lilt that became more pronounced when she was trying to charm someone. I felt instantly 17 again, vulnerable and afraid. "Who is this?" I asked, though I knew perfectly well. "It's your mother, sweetie, your mum." The casual use of endearments, as if she had any right to them after what she had done, sent a wave of nausea through me. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself in the present. I was no longer a helpless teenager. I was 36, successful, loved, secure. "What do you want?" I asked, proud of how steady my voice remained, while my heart raced painfully in my chest. "Can't a mother call to check on her daughter? I've missed you, Sophie. It's been too long." The manipulation was so transparent it was almost laughable. 19 years of silence, and suddenly she had missed me. I remained silent, waiting for her to reveal her true purpose. "I've been doing some thinking," she continued when I didn't respond. "About the past, about what happened. I think it's time we put all that behind us. Don't you? Family should stick together." "We're not family," I said flatly. "You made that very clear when you and Dad threw me out and told me I was dead to you." Another silence, then a sigh that was probably meant to sound sad, but came across as irritated. "People say things they don't mean when they're upset, Sophie. You know your father was old-fashioned. He didn't know how to handle your lifestyle, but he's gone now, and I think it's time for healing." This was the first I had heard of my father's death. Despite everything, the news sent a strange pang through me. Not exactly grief, but the final death of any possibility, however remote, of reconciliation or understanding. When did he die? I asked, my voice softer. 2 years ago. Heart attack. Her voice took on a martyred tone. I've been struggling on my own since then. The church helps where they can, but it's been so hard, Sophie. So hard. And there it was, the real reason for her call after all these years. I was surprised it had taken her this long to get to the point. I'm sorry for your loss, I said neutrally, but I'm not sure what that has to do with me. Well, you see, your father wasn't great with money. The medical bills, the funeral, and the house needs a new roof. The church has taken up collections, but it's not enough. She paused, then added with practiced vulnerability, I'm afraid I might lose the house, Sophie. Your childhood home. The house where I had been assaulted and thrown out like garbage. The home I had been told I was no longer welcome in. She thought this would be a selling point. Again, I'm sorry to hear that, but I don't see how I can help, I replied. Oh, but you can. Her voice suddenly brightened. I've been following your career, you know. So proud to see my daughter doing so well in real estate. All those properties you own in Boston. The fact that she had been tracking me while maintaining her silence was deeply unsettling. How long had she been watching from afar, waiting until she needed something to make contact? I thought perhaps, she continued, you could sign over one of your smaller properties to me. Just one. I could sell it and pay off the house, maybe have enough left for retirement. It would be the right thing to do, Sophie. A way to make amends for all the heartache you caused the family. I nearly laughed out loud at the audacity. Make amends for the heartache I caused? Well, yes. She sounded genuinely confused by my reaction. You broke your father's heart with your choices. He never really recovered from the shame of it. People at church still whisper, you know. The least you could do is help your widowed mother in her time of need. In that moment, I realized that in her distorted reality, she truly believed I owed her something. That after throwing out her teenage daughter and allowing her husband to assault me after 19 years of silence and abandonment, I should feel obligated to financially rescue her. No, I said simply. I won't be giving you any properties or money. You and Dad made your choice 19 years ago. You don't get to change your mind now that you need something from me. Her voice turned cold instantly, the facade of maternal concern vanishing. After everything we did for you, we gave you life, Sophie. We fed and clothed you for 17 years. You owe us. I owed you nothing the moment you allowed Dad to put his hands on me and threw me out into the street. I replied, my own voice hardening. Don't contact me again. I hung up my hands, still shaking. Within minutes, my phone began ringing again, the same Pennsylvania number. I blocked it. Then the text started coming from a different number, alternating between guilt trips and veiled threats. Everyone will know what an ungrateful daughter you are. I'll tell the whole family how you abandoned your poor mother after your father died. God sees how you treat your mother. Honor thy father and mother, Sophie. I blocked each new number as it appeared. I thought that would be the end of it, that she would eventually give up when she realized I wouldn't be manipulated or threatened into compliance. I was wrong. 3 days later, I was working from home when the doorbell rang. When I opened it, my mother stood on my porch, looking smaller than I remembered, but with the same calculating eyes. The shock of seeing her there at my home, my safe space, left me momentarily speechless. Aren't you going to invite your mother in? She asked with a tight smile. How did you find my address? I managed to ask. A mother has her ways, she replied cryptically. Now I've come all this way. The least you can do is offer me some tea. Before I could refuse, Rachel appeared behind me, placing a supportive hand on my back. Sophie, is everything okay? My mother's eyes narrowed as she took in Rachel, understanding our relationship immediately. Her smile became even more forced. You must be Sophie's roommate. Wife? Rachel corrected firmly, extending her hand. Rachel Taylor Connors. And you must be Mrs. Miller. My mother ignored Rachel's outstretched hand. I need to speak with my daughter privately. Family business. Rachel is my family, I said, finding my voice at last. Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of her. Mother's face hardened. Fine. I'll be direct then. I've come to discuss the property transfer. I've brought paperwork. She patted her handbag. I stared at her in disbelief. I already told you no. I'm not giving you any properties. She raised her voice, glancing around as if hoping neighbors would hear. After all I've sacrificed for you. Your poor father is barely cold in his grave and you're living in luxury while I might lose my home. What kind of daughter treats her mother this way? Rachel stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Mrs. Miller, I think you should leave now. Sophie has made her decision clear and you're trespassing on our property. Our property? My mother spat. So you're the one poisoning her against her family, turning my daughter against her own mother. You did that yourself 19 years ago, I said quietly. Please leave, or we'll call the police. Mother's face contorted with rage, reminding me horribly of my father the night they disowned me. You ungrateful little sinner, after everything we did for you, you owe me. Do you hear me? You owe me. She continued screaming as Rachel calmly closed the door and locked it. We watched through the window as she stood on our porch for nearly 20 minutes, alternating between ranting and crying theatrical tears before finally leaving. Are you okay? Rachel asked, holding me as I trembled with delayed shock and anger. No, I admitted, but I will be. I thought that would be the end of it. That having made her in-person appeal and been rejected, my mother would finally accept my decision and leave me alone. Once again, I was wrong. This was only the beginning of her campaign. Over the next 2 weeks, my mother's behaviour escalated from concerning to alarming. She began showing up at my office demanding to see me and creating scenes in the lobby when she was refused. She somehow obtained my work email and began sending multiple messages daily, ranging from biblical quotations about honouring one's parents to thinly veiled threats about exposing me to the community. She's completely unhinged, Eleanor said, after witnessing one of these lobbying incidents. You need to get a restraining order, Sophie. I was reluctant, still struggling with complicated feelings about the woman who had given birth to me, but it also caused me so much pain. She's my mother, I said weakly. No, Eleanor replied firmly. A mother protects her child. She threw you to the wolves when you were just a kid. Biology doesn't give her the right to terrorize you now. While I was considering legal options, the situation took another disturbing turn. Through mutual connections in Pennsylvania, I discovered that my mother had been telling people that I had stolen her inheritance, that money my father had intended for her had somehow been diverted to me. It was a complete fabrication, but it gave her a sympathetic narrative, casting her as the victim of a greedy, ungrateful daughter, rather than as the parent who had abused and abandoned her child. Rachel was increasingly concerned for my well-being. The stress was affecting my sleep, my work, and my overall health. This can't continue, she insisted after I received a phone call from a distant aunt I hadn't spoken to in 20 years, calling to express her disappointment in how I was treating my poor mother. I'll handle it, I promised, though I wasn't entirely sure how. Before I could formulate a plan, the situation reached its breaking point. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Rachel and I were enjoying a rare, quiet weekend at home, when a car pulled into our driveway, followed by another and then a third. My mother emerged from the first vehicle, followed by an older man I vaguely recognized as my Uncle Robert, my father's brother. From the other cars came more relatives, some I barely remembered from childhood holidays, others complete strangers who must have married into the family after I was exiled from it. What the hell, Rachel murmured as we watched from the window. My mother led the procession to our front door, her face set in the same righteous expression she used to wear when leading prayer groups at our kitchen table. The doorbell rang, and after a moment's hesitation, I answered it, Rachel standing supportively beside me. Sophie, my mother announced loudly as if introducing me to the assembled group. I've brought the family to talk some sense into you. This has gone on long enough. I looked past her at the collection of relatives, some looking uncomfortable, others openly curious, probably eager to get a glimpse of the family's black sheep after all these years. This is inappropriate, I said firmly. I've made my position clear. I'm not giving you any property or money. She's going to lose her home, Uncle Robert interjected, stepping forward. Your father would be ashamed of how you're treating your mother. Okay. Something in me snapped at the mention of my father and what he would think. 19 years of contained hurt and anger suddenly demanded expression. Would he? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Uncle Robert, did my mother tell you why I haven't been part of the family for the past 19 years? Did any of you ask why a 17-year-old girl suddenly disappeared? Uncomfortable glances were exchanged. My mother tried to interrupt, but I continued, my voice growing stronger. I was 17 when I came out as gay. Do you know what happened next? My father physically assaulted me. He slapped me, pushed me against walls, and put his arm against my throat, while my mother quoted Bible verses at me. Then they gave me 1 hour to pack and threw me out of the house. My mother told me I was dead to them and threw my childhood photos in the trash. Shocked murmurs ran through the group, my mother's face flushed with anger. That's not what happened, she snapped. You chose to leave. You chose your sinful lifestyle over your family. I was 17, I repeated, looking not at her, but at the others. I slept in my car for days before a friend's family took me in. I worked multiple jobs to put myself through college while finishing high school. I received no help, no support, not even a phone call in 19 years to see if I was alive or dead. And now, after all this time, she shows up demanding my property as atonement for being gay. Several of the relatives looked distinctly uncomfortable now. A younger woman, perhaps a cousin's wife, who had never heard this story, was openly crying. She's twisting everything, my mother said desperately. Sophie has always been dramatic. James was just trying to discipline her and she ran away. We tried to find her. That's a lie, I said calmly, and you know it's a lie. You told everyone I chose to leave that I abandoned the family, when in reality you and Dad threw me out like garbage for something I couldn't change and didn't choose. My mother's face contorted with rage as she realized she was losing control of the narrative. You ungrateful little bitch, she shrieked, lunging toward me. Rachel stepped between us, but my mother was beyond reason. She began picking up the potted plants from our porch and throwing them shattering ceramic pots on our steps. You owe me. After everything I've done for you, you think you can embarrass me in front of the family. I'll show you embarrassment. She grabbed a garden statue, a heavy stone bird that Rachel had given me for our anniversary, and hurled it through our front window. Glass shattered everywhere as relatives tried to restrain her. I'm calling the police, Rachel said, pulling out her phone. Go ahead, my mother screamed, breaking free from Uncle Robert's grip. Call them. Tell them how Sophie stole from her own mother. Tell them how she abandoned her family. I tried to calm the situation, stepping onto the porch, despite the danger. Please, everyone needs to leave now. This has gone too far. My mother took my appearance on the porch as an opportunity. She rushed at me again, nails clawing at my face. Give me what's mine. You owe me. I raised my arms to protect myself, backing away, but she followed, continuing to strike at me. The rest happened in a blur, relatives trying to pull her away, Rachel on the phone with emergency services, neighbours coming out to see what the commotion was about. By the time the police arrived, my mother had destroyed several $100s worth of property and was still ranting incoherently about what I owed her. The responding officers tried to calm her, but when one of them gently took her arm to move her away from me, she turned her rage on him, slapping him across the face. That was the final straw. The officers immediately restrained her, placing her in handcuffs while she screamed biblical verses and accusations. The sight of my elderly mother being led away in handcuffs should have been satisfying after all she had put me through, but instead I felt only a profound sadness for the waste of it all, for the relationship we might have had in another life. As the police car drove away, the remaining relatives stood awkwardly on my lawn, unsure what to do next. Uncle Robert approached me hesitantly. I had no idea, he said quietly. James told everyone you ran away with a girl from school, that you wanted nothing to do with the family. I never knew Now you do, I said simply. One by one, the relatives left, some offering awkward apologies, others too embarrassed to meet my eye. The last to leave was a young man I didn't recognize at first until he looked directly at me, with eyes so like my own. Adam, I whispered, hardly daring to believe it. My brother, now 32, nodded slightly. Can we talk sometime? Not now, but soon? I nodded, speechless with emotion, as he handed me a business card before walking to his car. As Rachel and I went back inside our now damaged home, my phone pinged with a social media notification. Someone had filmed the entire confrontation and posted it online. Within hours, the video would spread through the community back in Pennsylvania, finally revealing the truth my mother had concealed for 19 years. The aftermath of my mother's arrest left me emotionally drained. She was charged with destruction of property, assault, and assaulting a police officer, the last of which was the most serious. I could have pressed additional charges for the assault on me, but chose not to. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to be the one to potentially send my elderly mother to jail, though I also refused to bail her out. The viral video of her meltdown forced me to confront questions from friends and colleagues who had never known the full story of my estrangement from my family. For years, I had kept the details vague, saying only that my parents hadn't accepted my sexuality and we had lost touch. The reality now exposed to everyone was far more violent and traumatic. In the days following the incident, I received an outpouring of support from unexpected sources. Former high school classmates reached out with messages of solidarity. My old Sunday school teacher sent a tear-stained letter apologizing for not seeing what was happening in our home. Even my childhood pastor, now retired, sent a message expressing his sorrow that such abuse had occurred in a family he had counseled. But the most significant connection restored was with my brother Adam. 3 days after the confrontation, we met at a quiet cafe halfway between Boston and where he now lived in Connecticut. The man who sat across from me was a stranger with familiar eyes. He had our father's height and build, but thankfully none of his hardness. He fidgeted with his coffee cup, clearly nervous. "I don't know where to start," he admitted. "I've rehearsed this conversation in my head for years, but now that you're actually here—" "Years?" I asked, surprised. "You've thought about contacting me for years?" He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "Since I turned 18, but I didn't know how to find you at first, and then when I did find you online, I was too afraid you'd hate me for not standing up for you that night." "Adam, you were 13? I reminded him gently. "What could you have done against Dad?" "I could have called someone, the police or a neighbor. I could have tried to help you afterward. Instead, I just hid in my room like a coward while they threw you away." His voice broke on the last words. I reached across the table and took his hand. "You were a child in an abusive home too. Maybe not in the same way I was, but they controlled you through fear just like they did me." Over the next few hours, Adam filled in the 19-year gap, explaining how our parents had forbidden him from mentioning my name after I left. For years, he believed their version of events, that I had run away to pursue a sinful lifestyle. It wasn't until he went away to college and met openly LGBTQ students that he began questioning the narrative he had been raised with. "I tried to ask Mum about you once my sophomore year," he told me. "She had this complete meltdown crying and saying you had broken Dad's heart. When I suggested maybe they should try to find you and reconcile, Dad put his fist through the kitchen wall." After college, Adam had moved away, limiting his contact with our parents to occasional holidays and phone calls. He had married a woman named Sarah, who encouraged him to seek therapy to address his childhood trauma. In therapy, he had come to recognize the abuse that had permeated our home, not just toward me, but in subtler ways toward him as well. "When Dad died, I thought maybe Mum would soften," he continued. "But instead, she got more bitter, more fixated on the past. When she found out about your success through some real estate website, she became obsessed with the idea that you owed her." "And you?" I asked cautiously. "How do you feel about me being gay?" Adam looked directly at me for the first time. "Sophie, I couldn't care less who you love. I'm just ashamed it took me this long to tell you that." We both cried, then mourning the relationship we should have had, the years that had been stolen from us. Before we parted, Adam showed me pictures of his 2 young children, a boy and a girl I had never met, who were technically my niece and nephew. "I'd like them to know their Aunt Sophie," he said hesitantly. "If you're open to that." "I'd like that too," I replied, feeling a door opening to a future I had never dared imagine. Reconnecting with Adam was healing, but the incident with my mother had reopened old wounds that needed attention. I returned to therapy, working through the complex emotions triggered by seeing my mother again and witnessing her unrepentant narcissism. My therapist helped me process the guilt I felt for not helping her financially, reminding me that boundaries were necessary for my own well-being. "You don't owe your abusers access to your life or resources," she told me in one particularly powerful session. "Forgiveness, if you choose to give it, doesn't mean allowing them to harm you again." In the weeks that followed, various extended family members reached out, some apologetic for believing my parents' lies all these years, others still uncomfortable with my lifestyle, but hesitantly offering connection. I evaluated each potential relationship carefully, setting clear boundaries and expectations. With Rachel's unwavering support, I navigated this unexpected reconnection with my past. She attended family gatherings with me, holding my hand under the table when conversations became tense, reminding me with her presence that I had a solid foundation of love to return to, regardless of how these tentative new relationships developed. "I'm so proud of you," she told me late one night as we lay in bed. "You could have become hard and bitter after what they did to you, but instead you've built a life filled with love and generosity." Her words reminded me of how far I had come from the terrified, homeless teenager I once was. The journey had been painful beyond words at times, but it had led me to this moment, to this life that was rich with meaning and connection. My mother eventually accepted a plea deal that included probation, anger management classes, and a restraining order preventing her from contacting me. I heard through Adam that she was still telling anyone who would listen that I had abandoned her in her time of need, but her audience had significantly diminished now that the truth was known. As the dust settled, Rachel and I resumed our discussions about starting a family with a renewed sense of purpose. The cycle of abuse that had marked my childhood would end with me. Any child we welcomed into our home would know only love and acceptance, never fear or conditional approval. Adam and his family came to visit us in Boston that summer. Watching him play with his children in our backyard, seeing the gentle father he had become, despite our harsh upbringing, gave me hope that people could truly break free from toxic patterns and create something beautiful from the ashes of the past. "Do you ever miss them?" Adam asked quietly as we sat on the patio watching his kids chase fireflies with Rachel. "Mom and Dad, I mean." I considered the question carefully. "I miss the parents we should have had," I answered finally. "The ones who would have loved us unconditionally and celebrated our happiness. But those people never existed except in our imaginations." He nodded, understanding completely. "I used to think forgiveness meant forgetting or pretending the bad things never happened," he said. "Now I think maybe it's about acknowledging everything that happened and choosing to live fully anyway, not letting the past determine your future." "That's exactly what it is," I agreed, watching as Rachel scooped up my niece and spun her around, both of them laughing in the fading evening light. The path from that terrible night 19 years ago to this peaceful moment had been long and arduous. I had survived not just by chance, but through countless acts of courage, both large and small. Each time, I chose to trust again, to love again, to build rather than destroy. I had pushed back against the legacy of pain my parents had tried to saddle me with. In the end, the most profound lesson I had learned was that family is defined not by blood, but by love, not by obligation, but by choice. The family I had created for myself with Rachel, with friends like Eleanor, and now potentially with Adam and his children, was real and valuable precisely because it was chosen freely, nurtured intentionally, and maintained with love. As the stars appeared overhead and the summer breeze carried the scent of Rachel's carefully tended garden, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. The past could not be changed, but the future stretched before us, full of possibilities yet to be discovered. And for the first time in a very long time, I was completely unafraid to embrace it. What would you do if a family member who abandoned you suddenly reappeared demanding something from you? Have you ever had to create strong boundaries with toxic relatives? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family trauma and building a life filled with love and authenticity. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you have the power to define family on your own terms.